Sometimes heroes are not born with capes, but with courage. This is the unbelievable, true story of an 18-year-old girl who did something no one ever imagined possible. She landed a full-size passenger jet, completely alone, saving 250 lives. It was a bright Sunday morning, 8:30 a.m. Flight Skyjet 472, a Boeing 737, was preparing for takeoff from Doha International Airport, heading to Istanbul. On board, 243 passengers, 6 crew members, and 1 young aviation trainee, Sophie Carter, just 18 years old. Sophie wasn't a pilot. She was traveling back home after completing a short aviation internship. Her dream was to become a pilot one day. For Sophie, this was supposed to be just another flight. A few hours in the air, a couple of movies, and home. But fate had a different flight plan that day. 2 hours into the flight, as the plane crossed the Arabian Sea, something went terribly wrong. Suddenly, the aircraft jerked violently. Trays flew. Passengers screamed, and oxygen masks dropped. Cockpit voices heard faintly through radio. Pilot, Captain Ryan, "We're losing pressure, hydraulic failure." Co-pilot, "Trying to stabilize. We're not responding." Within minutes, the hydraulic system, the heart of the aircraft's control, was severely damaged due to a technical malfunction. The pilots tried every emergency protocol they could, but the system wasn't responding. The plane started to descend rapidly. The pilots fought for control, but suddenly, Captain Ryan's voice went silent. In the chaos, the captain suffered a heart attack from the stress and lack of oxygen. The co-pilot, Daniel Hayes, tried to take over, but in the confusion and with failing systems, even he was knocked unconscious due to low cabin pressure. Now imagine, a giant passenger jet, thousands of feet in the air, losing altitude, and no pilot conscious to fly it. Panic spread through the cabin. Some passengers cried, others prayed. But among all this chaos, one voice stood out. Row 12, Seat A, Sophie Carter. She noticed something strange. The cockpit door slightly open, and no voices from inside. Ignoring her fear, Sophie unbuckled her seatbelt, pushed past the crying passengers, and ran toward the front. Flight attendant stops her. Flight attendant panicking. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. It's not safe." Sophie, firmly, "Someone has to check on the pilots." "Let me through." She entered the cockpit and froze. Both pilots were slumped over the controls, warning lights flashing everywhere. Sophie immediately grabbed the radio headset, her hands shaking. Her voice trembles. "Sophie, Mayday, Mayday! This is Skyjet 472. Both pilots are down. We need help." The response crackled almost instantly. "ATC, Air Traffic Control. Skyjet 472. Identify yourself. Who's speaking?" "Sophie. My name is Sophie Carter. I'm just a trainee. I'm not a pilot." On the ground, panic began at Doha ATC Center. They couldn't believe what they were hearing. An 18-year-old girl, alone in the cockpit of a Boeing 737. "Get me her background. Contact nearby aircraft for assistance. We can't lose this jet." Every second was critical. The plane was losing altitude fast. Fuel was dropping and the aircraft was heading toward a populated coastal region. Sophie had never controlled an actual airplane, only flight simulators during training. But this time it was no simulation. 250 lives were in her hands. "All right, Sophie. Listen carefully. Keep calm. We're going to guide you step by step." She looked at the dead pilots beside her, her hands trembling over the controls. She whispered to herself, "Dad always said, a real pilot stays calm. Okay, I can do this." And with that, began the most unbelievable moment in aviation history. An 18-year-old, no license, no real flight experience, now flying a Boeing 737, thousands of feet above the sea, with hundreds of souls praying behind her. ATC contacted nearby aircraft for visual support. A military jet was sent to fly beside her to help her stabilize. Pilot from escort jet radio. "Skyjet 472, we see you. You're doing great. Keep your altitude steady." Sophie's breathing slowed. Her focus sharpened. For the first time, the plane's descent began to steady. The passengers, unaware of the full story, only knew that someone, a young girl, was flying their plane. And in that moment, hope replaced fear. But little did Sophie know. The real challenge hadn't even begun yet, because landing a plane like this was almost impossible. without full control systems, and the next 30 minutes would decide whether she would become a miracle or a memory. In the heart of the storm, when chaos took over 35,000 feet in the sky, one young girl refused to give up. Sophie Carter, only 18, was now in full control of Skyjet 472, a Boeing 737 with 250 lives aboard. Her eyes were locked on the blinking instruments before her. The radio crackled again. At sea, voice steady but urgent. Skyjet 472, this is Doha Control. Sophie, we're here with you. You're doing great. Can you read us? Sophie, voice trembling. Yes, I can hear you. The plane is stable for now. What do I do next? The truth was terrifying. The autopilot was disabled, hydraulics failing, and both pilots unconscious beside her. Sophie had to manually control a 70-ton jet with no co-pilot, no experience, and no time. ATC officer, calmly. Sophie, listen carefully. You need to check your altitude. Tell me what it says. She looked at the panel and dials spinning. 21,000 feet. And descending slowly. Good, that's fine. Keep the yoke steady, don't pull too hard. Every instruction mattered. One wrong move, and the jet could nosedive. For a moment, Sophie's mind drifted. She remembered her father, a flight mechanic, teaching her how to stay calm during her simulator training. Father's voice echoing in her head. Flying isn't about power, Sophie. It's about balance and trust. If the machine fails, you become the system. She closes her eyes briefly, whispers to herself. Sophie. Okay, Dad. I can do this. Suddenly, a new warning light appeared. Hydraulic pressure low. Sophie, frustrated. No. What now? Sophie, stay calm. That's okay. We'll reroute control manually. But the left rudder wasn't responding. The plane started drifting slightly off course. Passengers screamed again as the aircraft tilted. Food carts rolled down the aisles, children crying. At that moment, Sophie's courage was tested beyond imagination. She gripped the control column with both hands, fighting against gravity and fear. Sweat dripped from her forehead as she forced the plane back to level. Sophie yelling. Hold on, everyone! Please hold on! All right, team, she's flying blind. Patch her to Captain Morgan, emergency remote guidance. Captain Morgan, firm but calm. Hello, Sophie. This is Captain Morgan. I'm going to help you land that bird, okay? Sophie, relieved. Okay, Captain. Just tell me what to do. I'm ready. Captain Morgan. Good girl. First, reduce throttle to 50%. You'll feel the engine slow. That's normal. Captain Morgan. Now check your heading. We're diverting you to Al Riyadh International. Longest runway available. You're 90 miles out. But fate wasn't done testing her yet. Ahead, a thunderstorm began forming. Sophie. Captain, I see dark clouds ahead. Is that the airport? Captain Morgan. No, Sophie, that's a storm. We can't go through it, but we can go around it. Turn right, slowly. She turned the control yoke gently. Lightning flashed outside. The plane rattled. Passengers gasped, praying loudly. Every second felt like an eternity. The young girl, holding hundreds of lives steady through winds that could tear wings apart. By now, the story had reached every aviation channel and news outlet across the world. Live coverage began. Breaking news, passenger flight Skyjet 472. Being controlled by an 18-year-old girl after pilots collapse mid-air. In homes, people watched with disbelief. Across airports, pilots stood frozen by the radar screens. A single voice from the cockpit echoed through the world. Sophie, I'll bring them home. I promise. Captain Morgan. Okay, Sophie, time to start descending. Lower your altitude slowly to 5,000 feet. Sophie. Copy that. Descending. She moved the control lever down, carefully balancing the plane's angle. Outside, the storm started to clear. The golden horizon of sunset peeked through. You're doing it, Sophie. You're really doing it! For the first time in hours, there was hope. But then, another jolt. The landing gear warning light flashed. Sophie. Landing gear isn't responding. Captain Morgan. Don't panic. Try the manual lever. To your right, under the throttle. She reached out, pulled the emergency gear lever with all her strength. A loud metallic sound echoed beneath the plane. Sophie. Gear down. I think. Captain Morgan. Good girl. Visual confirmed from escort jet? Escort pilot, radio. Visual confirmed. Landing gear down and locked. As the runway lights of Al Riyadh International appeared below, Sophie's heart raced faster than the engines. You're 2 miles out, Sophie. Flaps to 30 degrees. Keep your descent smooth. Her hands moved exactly as she'd practiced years ago in a simulator, and except this time, there were no resets, no second tries. Okay, flaps set. Altitude 800 feet. Captain Morgan. Beautiful. You're almost there. As the runway lights grew larger, everything went silent in her mind. No noise, no fear, just focus. She whispered softly to herself. Dad, stay with me. Skyjet 472, cleared for landing. Winds calm. You're good to go. The entire control room held its breath. Hundreds of lives, balanced on the courage of one teenage girl. Narrator, low suspenseful tone. But as Sophie pulled the aircraft toward the runway, the final seconds would test her in ways no simulator ever could. Because landing is where every flight is truly decided. 30,000 feet above the ground, a young girl named Sophie Carter was doing the impossible, landing a Boeing 737 completely alone. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the runway lights of Al Riyadh International Airport appeared in the distance, glowing like a line of hope in the dark sky. Captain Morgan, radio. All right, Sophie, this is it. You're on final approach. Remember what I told you. Steady hands, gentle movements. You can do this. Sophie breathing heavily. Copy that. I can do this. I will do this. Sophie adjusted the flaps. 30 degrees, just like Captain Morgan said. Her left hand gripped the throttle. Her right the control yoke. The plane descended through the orange glow of sunset. Below her, a city, unaware of the miracle unfolding in the sky. ATC, Skyjet 472, you're cleared for landing. Runway 09L, winds calm, visibility clear. Sophie focused. Runway in sight. Beginning final descent. Behind her, 250 passengers sat in silence, holding hands, whispering prayers, eyes closed. The cabin was filled with fear and faith. Sophie. What's happening now? Captain Morgan. Calm down, Sophie. You've hit a crosswind. Compensate, tilt your yoke slightly left. She adjusted. The plane swayed violently for a second, then leveled out. Captain Morgan. Perfect. You're back on course. Keep her steady. Every muscle in Sophie's body ached from the tension. She'd been flying for hours, running on nothing but adrenaline and faith. You're at 1,000 feet, Sophie. Time to slow her down. Throttle back to 40%. Keep your nose level. She pulled the lever gently. The engines whined softer. Through the windshield, the glowing runway grew larger, like destiny calling her name. The passengers began to sense it. The crying stopped. Silence filled the cabin, the kind of silence before a miracle. And in that moment, memories flooded her mind, her childhood drawings of airplanes, her father teaching her in the simulator, the dreams she once thought were far away. Her father's voice echoed again in her mind. When you fly, don't think of fear. Think of the people who trust you. She looked at the reflection of her face in the glass, red eyes, trembling lips, and then whispered, I won't let them down. 500 feet. You're almost there. Keep her aligned. Don't overcorrect. Sophie whispering. 500? Come on, girl. Stay with me. Outside, the escort jet pilot radioed in. Escort pilot, she's lined up perfectly. She's going to make it. ATC room, cheering softly. Come on, Sophie. Bring them home. Just when it seemed victory was near, a powerful gust of crosswind hit the plane. The jet swayed dangerously, the right wing dipping toward the ground. Captain Morgan, urgent. Sophie, counter left, quick! Her instincts kicked in. She turned the yoke left, adjusted throttle slightly. The plane groaned, shaking violently, but she held steady. Sophie, through gritted teeth. You're not going down! Not today. After a few agonizing seconds, the plane realigned perfectly with the runway. Captain Morgan. Beautiful correction, Sophie. That was professional-level flying. 200 feet. 150. The ground rushed up toward them. Sophie gently pulled back the yoke, just enough to raise the nose. Captain Morgan. Ease up, now, now! Touchdown! And in that single moment, history was made. The massive jet bounced once, then glided smoothly along the runway. Passengers screamed one, but this time out of joy. Sophie crying softly. "We're on the ground!" "We made it." Captain Morgan, over radio, emotional. "You did it, Sophie. You did it." Emergency vehicles lined the runway, lights flashing. As the engines powered down, Sophie removed her headset, tears streaming down her face. She looked at the unconscious pilots beside her, then out the window at the rescue crews. Flight attendant, over speaker, emotional voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have landed safely." Passengers broke into applause, some crying, others hugging strangers. Sophie sat in silence in the cockpit, her hands still shaking on the controls. Captain Morgan, "Sophie, you didn't just land that plane. You saved 250 lives today." She smiled weakly and whispered, "I just did what anyone would do. I couldn't let them die." Within hours, her name flooded the news. Teenage girl lands passenger plane after pilots collapse. Airlines, pilots, and millions of people around the world called her a miracle of courage. Videos of her landing went viral. People watched the moment she touched down, unable to believe what they saw. The passengers she saved began calling her their guardian angel in the sky. Weeks later, Sophie was invited to the same airport she once feared she wouldn't reach alive. But this time, not as a passenger. She stepped inside the cockpit again, her name now written on a golden plaque. "Captain Sophie Carter, honorary pilot, Skyjet Airlines." She smiled, looked out the same cockpit window, and whispered, "Dad, I finally did it." And that's how an 18-year-old girl proved that courage can fly higher than fear. When the wheels touched the ground and the engines finally fell silent, a new kind of noise began. The sound of 250 heartbeats alive. As the passengers stepped out of Skyjet 472, the warm evening air of Al Riyadh International Airport felt like a miracle. Some kissed the ground. Some cried in disbelief. But one girl sat quietly in the cockpit, staring at her trembling hands. She had done the impossible. Within minutes, the tarmac was filled with rescue vehicles, ambulances, and security teams. Firefighters surrounded the plane, ready for any emergency, but there was none. The giant aircraft stood still, safe and whole. Inside the cabin, paramedics rushed toward the cockpit. "We have 2 pilots unconscious, pulse weak but steady." They lifted Captain Ryan and co-pilot Daniel Hayes onto stretchers, rushing them to the ambulance. Sophie watched, exhausted but calm. Her duty, the one she never asked for, was complete. For the passengers, Sophie wasn't just a girl anymore. She was their savior. An elderly woman approached her, tears streaming down her face. "Old lady, you're the reason I'm going home to my family, sweetheart." "Thank you." Sophie smiled weakly, her voice barely a whisper. "I just did what I had to do." Another man, a father clutching his young son, hugged her tightly. "Father, you're our guardian angel." And for a brief moment, under the bright lights and chaos, a young girl who had never flown a real plane became a symbol of hope. Within hours, the story spread across the world. Breaking news: 18-year-old girl lands passenger plane. Saves 250 lives. Courage at 30,000 feet. The girl who became a pilot in the sky. News helicopters hovered above the airport. Cameras flashed as Sophie was escorted through a sea of journalists. "Sophie, how did you do it?" "What went through your mind?" She blinked at the cameras, still dazed. "Sophie, I just listened to them, to the voices guiding me, and I didn't give up." Her voice, fragile yet powerful, was replayed on screens across the globe. In the days that followed, aviation authorities began their investigation. The black box recordings revealed everything. Her calm under pressure, her coordination with Captain Morgan, and her voice saying, "I'll bring them home." The world was stunned. Within a week, Skyjet Airlines held a press conference. Skyjet CEO on stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we honor someone who redefined courage. She's not a pilot by profession, but by heart, Sophie Carter." Sophie walked onto the stage, overwhelmed, wearing a Skyjet uniform jacket gifted by the company. Tears filled her eyes as the CEO handed her a golden flight badge engraved with her name. That moment marked the beginning of a legacy. A few days later, Sophie finally met Captain Morgan, the voice that had guided her through the storm. He stood waiting by the runway, smiling proudly. "Captain Morgan, You did better than most trained pilots would have under that pressure. Sophie, shy smile. I just did what you told me. I was terrified the whole time. Captain Morgan, that's what makes you a real pilot. Not the uniform, not the license. It's the courage to fly when everyone else is falling apart. They shook hands, a moment of mutual respect that would be remembered forever. Both pilots, Captain Ryan and co-pilot Daniel, survived. After weeks in recovery, they personally thanked Sophie for saving their lives. Captain Ryan, in hospital bed, smiling. I taught hundreds of pilots in my career, but none as brave as you. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, sir, but I just wanted everyone to go home safe. A year later, Sophie's life had changed completely. She was no longer just the girl who landed the plane. She had become a licensed pilot in training with full sponsorship from Skyjet Airlines. The same cockpit that once terrified her was now her second home. Instructor, smiling. Ready for takeoff, Captain Carter? She adjusted her headset and grinned. Always ready. Sophie's story inspired millions. Schools, aviation academies, and young dreamers across the world. Documentaries were made, books were written, and a bronze statue of her, standing beside a jet, with her hands on the controls, was unveiled at Al Riyadh Airport with a plaque that read, Courage is not the absence of fear, Wasa, it's flying through it. Sophie, speech. I wasn't born brave. I was scared, terrified. But courage doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you keep going even when you are. If an 18-year-old girl like me can fly through fear, so can you. 1 year ago, Sophie Carter looked out this same window as a passenger, dreaming of becoming a pilot. Today, she sits in the captain's seat, guiding hundreds through the same sky that once tried to break her. She didn't just land a plane. She landed hope, and proved that sometimes heroes don't need wings to fly.